Justin, take us back in time. You're a youngster. Are you a book reader, fort builder, troublemaker, or all of the above?
Less a troublemaker, but definitely a book reader and a fort builder. Reading lots of weird books. I have distinct memories of reading a book about vampires when I was in the fifth grade. And it was two books I checked out from the library this time of the year, actually, of course, this time of the year. And and then there was the middle of the book, often the middle of books there'll be like the color pictures, and in the middle of the
Mm-hmm.
book there was a color picture of a woman who had bright red hair, and she was a vampire. And I became convinced that the girl in sixth grade, who had the same kind of hair, was also a vampire, and I became deathly afraid of her. Um, and I remember this moment where she looked at me and she smiled in this way that was probably just like the way kids look at each other.
Yeah.
And I became convinced that she knew that I knew, and that it was over.
Did you ever see her reflection?
I never did. It's again, and so that day I came home and I was out in my dad's work shed, like sharpening steaks and getting ready for what would be my uh Peter Cushing moment. But so yeah, and Fort Builder, yeah, absolutely. I remember being out in the woods, just like building lean-tos. And yeah, we had a pretty liberal's not the right word. We had a very with Southern family. It was sort of like, you were out until the lights came on, to the street lights came on, and then maybe you came home in the weekend and maybe you didn't. You ended up on Unsolved Mysteries or something. Um, and but I remember like building lean-tos, and my dad's like, "You want to go stay in your lean-to tonight?" And he'd come out there and take a look at it and make sure it was up to all OSHA standards or whatever.
Structurally
And
sound and whatnot.
yeah, structurally sound, and protect you from whatever raccoons with rabies that existed in the woods. And yeah, I slept out there a couple of times, and yeah, me and my brother and some friends of ours would stay out there, and it was a lot of fun. Again, it's the kind of things you can get away with in the '80s that now you would definitely get your kids would definitely get taken away from you.
You're Mississippi, right? If I'm correct.
Mississippi, that's right. Yeah, that's where I'm
Mm.
from.
And what year? How old are you? Like, what years are we talking here?
I was born in '81,
Mm,
so
mm,
I'm in the tail end of Gen X, I suppose.
gotcha.
But yeah, what am I? 42? I don't know.
Okay.
Nothing matters. Between 40 and 50 is a no man's land.
Just trying to paint the picture.
Yeah, yeah. So it's definitely the '80s. Definitely the '80s. I remember being sort of, 8 or 9, being kind of out in the woods, and the woods weren't far from our house, so it wasn't hard to be out in the woods. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was uh, being that close to nature and being that far away from home, but also knowing that if you needed to like skedaddle because you heard something, it was a
Yeah.
it was a hot run to the house, but at least you could get back to the house.
So, off the top of your head, do you remember any? Just like myself, I was a fort builder as well. Live in the South, if you can't tell from the voice. Uh, my grandfather always told me these stories about the goat man and the dog man and all these southern
Yeah.
legends and make you scared to stay in the woods. Did you have anything like that growing up?
Yeah, we had in Mississippi, we had witch spots. There were spots in the woods where nothing would grow, and that's where the witches danced. So we had the witch spots. So you didn't want to be anywhere near a witch spot on a full moon. Um, what else do we have out there? Yeah, there's all kinds of legends in the big black river of piracy and all this, that, and the other. And I don't know if I really were pirates in the big black river. I doubt it. But why would they get that far up? But again, when you're 8 or 10, you don't ask a lot of questions. It's
Right.
far better to get, it's far better for you to believe in the ghost pirates, and them not be real, for you not to believe in them, and they are real.
And yeah, it's more fun that way.
Yeah, it was certainly more fun. Way more fun. Better tales around the fire. And but yeah, what else do we have? There was always the idea that there was always somebody in the woods, some hermit, some weirdo witch, something out there. And again, the boundary between what was civilized and what wasn't. In the same way that it was worrying to the people in New England in the 17th century, I still think it was worrying to working class people in the 1980s, and the height of the satanic panic and all that stuff. And so I think that many of those deep, very deep American anxieties, they survived. They lived on in the bone deep memories of people all over this country. And so I think that's the reason why horror as a
Mm.
genre has done so well in this country, is because we have a bone deep memory of it.
Right, and specifically, if you just want to just narrow down genres of folk horror, specifically, when you see things like The Witch, goes back to exactly what you're just talking about.
Right.
And the
Jugface, I think, is another great example of folk horror, Appalachian folk horror. Um, no, for sure. I think that that these anxieties are very, very American anxieties, and that is why
yes,
we have done so well in that genre, and that the occult has always terrified us, and I think that's part of the reason why we're both deeply taken to it and also very deeply repulsed by it.
right. And so you just mentioned you read books, vampire books. Did you lean towards any specific author growing up? I mean, I don't know, just throwing out a name, Stephen King, something like that, or anything
Yeah,
like that.
it's funny. I never got into reading fiction. I still have a difficult time reading fiction to this day. Sometimes people find it difficult to believe that, considering what I do, which depending on what you believe is mostly what I read is fiction. Um, but yeah, I never got into reading much fiction. Of course, I read scary stories to tell in dark and all that kind of stuff when I was a kid, the obligatory scary stuff, scary stuff. Um, which is funny because I remember the generation later than me were reading Goosebumps, and I was like, that's fake. Um, that doesn't have like the horrifying skull woman, in the black and white drawings. I'm like, this is weak sauce, man. Like, you're not really like, that stuff's not keeping you up at night with these terrifying black and white, dripping, oily pictures of Alvin Schwartz. I think it was his name. No, that wasn't his name. I think it was Alvin Schwartz is the guy that edited it. I can't remember the fellow's name that did all the pictures. Gamble? That might be you're right. Gamble.
You got
Stephen
me.
Gamble. I think it's something like that. Yeah, so I didn't get so much into reading into reading fiction. But yeah, authors from that time period, it all whoever wrote Wait Till Helen Comes, which is a child scary story book that I still have, Real Vampires, I think was written by a dude named Cohen. Yeah, it was just, there's a book at Loch Ness Monster I read. I used to love the Time Life Unexplained series, which are all sort of like Bermuda Triangle, Atlantis.
Got a lot of them on the shelf over there.
Oh yeah, yeah. Those are like, that's my nostalgia trip, go into the local library and pulling off the ghost one, and the really famous picture of the brown lady of Random Hall, or the Vorley Rectory, and all these famous
Oh
ghost
yeah.
photographs and stuff like that. Yeah, stuff fired my imagination as a kid, man. That stuff never left me. I don't know if I believe any of that stuff anymore, but I will say that my what I do now, as an academic in the world of esotericism and the occult, the my what I wanted to what I wanted to do was put myself in the shoes of the people taking those photographs or experiencing those things, and not to judge them, not to debunk them, not to to jump down their throat about what was real and what wasn't real. And I don't have a lot of interest in doing that in my academic career, but to really understand them and to make
Yes.
sense of why that mattered to them made a lot of sense to me as a kid and makes a lot of sense to me now. And it was always like a sense of like, I'm not sure if I believe in this stuff, but what I do believe is that people have weird experiences, and let's talk about those experiences in an honest and frank way, and let's also talk about the literature around them in an honest and frank way that isn't either let's believe everything they say, because we shouldn't do that, but also let's not just throw everything out baby with the bathwater just because we a priori just don't believe in ghosts or fairies or leprechauns and demons. Let's try to take it in a sympathetic light, but a critical light. And I think those two things, you can do those two things at the same time. You can be both sympathetic and you can be critical.
Right. And when, even early on, Justin, when you start to become interested in the occult, as you say now, obviously, you don't believe these things now, but early on, was that interest, was that part of it? Were you trying to debunk, not debunk as a, I don't want to use that word, but were you trying to see if those things were real yourself?
Yeah, I was really trying to understand. Like, I was getting told one story at school about science and evolution and the history of the universe and the Big Bang and the four fundamental forces and chemistry and science. And that all made sense to me in a real deep way. It made sense to me. And then, I looked at the other stuff like ghosts and angels and demons, and that also made sense to me. It's like, yeah, there must be some kind of hidden world. Like, all these people can't be lying. All these people can't be making up stuff. There must be something to all this. And it became an interest of how to square that circle, how to tie those things together. And what really led me into a lot of this was one, alchemy. I became very interested in alchemy at a very young age. I still have tracks I printed out on the high school uh, computer, just printing out page after page of JPEGs of old scans of alchemy books. And I was in Latin at the time, so I was trying to translate them. That's what I was working on translating. And that was the idea that, my teacher, my middle school natural science teacher, was really clear about the fact that they had not figured out everything in physics, and that really fired my imagination. So I thought maybe it was still possible that the things the alchemists had discovered were ancient secrets that had been lost for reasons of bias or whatever else. The other thing that I really came latched to was the whole story around John Dee and Edward Kelly and the angels they allegedly talked to, and the fact that they had revealed a language. And again, ties back to me being in Latin. If you study Latin, you realize you can't accidentally Latin. You can accidentally fail Latin, but you cannot accidentally Latin. Latin's a highly structured language with a bunch of damn rules, and you can fail the hell out of some Latin. And it became clear to me that even so far as this language, this angelic language, had rules, then it couldn't be accidental. It couldn't just be the Pentecostals down the street saying gibberish. That there are
Right.
rules here, and that those rules meant something was going on. There was an intelligence there, and that really also fired my imagination. And it was never a desire to debunk. And I don't, if you folks ever watch my channel, I don't have a single debunking video. That's just not how I operate. I don't believe in that way of doing education. I'm not there to disabuse people of beliefs. What I'm there is to present evidence and present data and present what we know, given the confines of how we know and how far we can know. And people have to come to their own decisions. And I give people at the end of every esoteric episode, there's a list of books that people can go and do the work of reading this stuff on their own or what have you. So it was never a desire on my part to debunk, and I still don't have that desire. It was a desire to understand. And if understanding means that a better theory than angels are talking to these guys, or ghosts are causing your floor to rattle, or there's a giant monster in a lake in Scotland, if there's a better analysis than that, then I'm happy to come to that analysis. But I'm not assuming things about the world and then go and trying to debunk people's beliefs about God or angels and demons or Enochian spirits or magic or what have you. I'm saying, like, this is the evidence we have and this is the literature we have, and let's start with there, and let's start with the most open mind we can, and let's let the evidence lead us. And wherever the evidence leads and wherever critical thinking leads, that's where we got to go. And you may not like it, but it's not about what we like. It's about going with the evidence.
Well said. And you mentioned John Dee and Edward Kelly, how they sort of stoked your curiosity. That's
Mhm.
two of the most common names that come up when you ask folks about their interest in these topics. So, what do you think it is about Dee and Kelly specifically that makes them so alluring across the board?
Well, they wrote in English. All
Mhm.
the diaries are basically in English, so that means that you don't have to learn to, there's chunks in Latin, but you can, even with some basic early modern English, you can get access to them. So that's the first thing, is that they're just in English. I mean, if it were all in Latin or Hebrew, I guarantee you people wouldn't know about it. The second is that they were incorporated pretty early on into ceremonial magic with the Golden Dawn, so that meant their prestige went way up. Also, even a couple generations after they were dead, you have an edition, The True and Faithful Relation, that's published. Of course, it's published to lampoon them and show that they were, in fact, in league with the devil and Anabaptists, God forbid, these kinds of things. So I think that mostly it's just a selection bias. We tend to gravitate to what's most accessible to us, and the D. Kelly stuff is just frankly very accessible, in the Anglophone world, and given its connection to Aleister Crowley, to Tool has a whole track with a title written in the Enochian language, and then the language part. Everyone's attracted to exotic languages. People make languages up. Tolkien invented Elvish, and things like this. So it's just and also the sex stuff is kind of scandalous, right? Dee and Kelly switching wives
Yeah.
at the very end of the experiences. And there's the intrigue involved with Dee as a kind of espionage character over there on the continent. So what's most surprising to me about the whole Dee Kelly stuff is not that people are interested in it. What's surprising to me most about it is that it's not a Netflix series. That's what boggles my mind. Like that it's just not it's not already a Netflix series, and that you wouldn't have everybody from Francis Bacon and Bill Shakespeare and everybody and their mother wrapped up in all of it, and you make the best conspiracy theory Netflix show of the 17th century. John, King James the First out there being tormented by witches, and him writing the demon, his demonography book, and the fact that that's just not a Netflix series that we're all talking about, that is what is surprising to me.
And it's already
Not,
pre-written for you.
basically, yeah, you have the entire script there in the diaries and stuff. So yeah, what boggles my mind is not that it's popular. What's boggles my mind is that it's not already like just what like normie people are talking about when they're after Game of Thrones.
Yeah. Have you? I don't know if you're familiar with the actor Armin Shimmerman. He's a Star Trek fan at all.
Next Generation. That was I think it was my last touch to Star Trek was Next Generation, which I
Quark. Do you know
loved.
Quark off the top of your head?
I do know Quark. Yep.
Yep, Armin Shimmerman. That's Armin Shimmerman.
Okay.
And he's writing a novel series about John Dee. And he actually had was trying to source a specific story regarding some voodoo dolls, I think, that were found, and they came to Dee to I guess to debunk these or see if there was some sort of mystical attack on the queen at the time, and he couldn't find a source for it. So he thought maybe he had dreamed it or something, or he had read it in some fiction book and couldn't find it. But we ended up contacting the John Dee database, and we did. That guy, the guy who runs the John Dee database, had to run his through his files that were not scanned onto the site, and he actually ended up finding it. So just a little Dee sidetrack story that we had, our own little John Dee adventure.
Yeah, I mean, when the Queen Elizabeth had any sort of like weirdo question she needed an answer, she kicked it over to Dee.
Yeah.
She did visit him on a couple of occasions, a couple of times down there and at Mortlake.
So Justin, before we go too far from your childhood, I wanted to ask you what when you think about the formative films and TV shows that you grew up on, what comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, definitely Evil Dead.
Classic.
Evil Dead 2, particularly. It's a movie about scary book. It's a book about an evil book written in blood, and it summons these dark forces. It's an ancient Sumerian. It just was a huge part of my kid universe, was this obsession with ancient books of ritual power. And of course, it's funny now because part of my side hustle with Esoterica is I deal in antiquarian rare books, and so I can reach across my table and pick up a copy of Disinquitarum Magicarum, which is a pretty famous witch hunting manual here from 1604. So this is this is not the Necronomicon, to be sure, but it is something like it is the most important encyclopedia of magic and witchcraft ever produced in the early modern period.
It's close enough. It's close enough to the Necronomicon to be cool.
It's close enough. I mean, it certainly resulted in more deaths, unfortunately, than the Necronomicon, sadly. And it's really something very quite grim. I'm sure I could flip to a certain page here, and I was just looking at this the other day and randomly opened to the chapter on here's the chapter on apprehension. I'm sure right after that, I'm not sure if it'll pick it up, but De Tortura, on torture. So it's how to properly engage in torture. So the Evil Dead series was a huge impact on me, just in the sense of like ancient books and things like that. I think Halloween, the original Halloween, also made a huge impression on me as like a movie about how evil could come into
Suburbia
life.
Yeah.
Suburbia. And I grew up in a working class neighborhood, not so much a suburban neighborhood, but just like the idea that evil could just be a shape, It could look
Yeah.
like a human being, but it really wasn't. There's something really terrifying to me as a youngster about that. That it could invade your neighborhood in a way that could do that in a way that to me was in some sense scarier than Jason. Because I never went to summer camp, so I was like, I'm safe from that. Um, which
Right.
is which is funny now because I end up going to camps now to go to weddings. I'm going to one this weekend, and my brother and I both went to the wedding of my sister-in-law, which was at the same camp I'm going to this weekend actually. And my brother and I showed up to the summer camp. And we just sort of stopped when the cabins are all laid out and the pontoons in the lake and all this. My brother and I were like, "Nah, we ain't going to this. I got one reference point for this. This is bad news."
Yeah.
And my sister, my wife and sister-in-law, no, it'll be a lot of fun this weekend. We can all we can have some drinks and do drugs and then I'm like, y'all all gonna die. This
Yeah,
place is cursed. It's got a place got a curse on it.
out of all the slashers, Jason is the easiest one to avoid. It's like just don't go to
Yeah,
camp.
don't go to camp. You're done. It's easy. You know. And so yeah, so those movies were important to me. Um, again, like I was the kind of kid that was just every Friday night, USA Up All Night, and I was just up every, watching those every Friday night, staying up as late as I could to watch whatever they had to dish out. It was like watching uh Texas Chainsaw Massacre, watching, Toxic Avenger. You'd sometimes get a random Dario Argento film on there, and it
Mm,
would leave your mind blown forever. Um, Fulgi. Yeah, I remember seeing,
yeah.
as a kid, seeing some, seeing the, seeing some of his stuff, just like, blown away by that. But yeah, I think the cosmic horror stuff settled in with me. First in film, and then later I discovered Lovecraft and really picked up Lovecraft as a late teen, early 20s person.
I was gonna say it'd be a damn shame for someone who was so into terrible books early on to not fall into Lovecraft.
Yeah, so eventually I did fall into Lovecraft, and I've actually written a bit about Lovecraft and done some episodes about him. Presented at the Necronomicon a couple years ago. I'll probably present the next this year if they'll have me again. Um, I'm trying to think of other movies that were like really. I think also Hellraiser made a big impression upon me. This idea of like that there was a kind of puzzle that one could solve, and it could unleash these it could be a kind of gate to another dimension that was hellish in some way. Um, which I really love the idea that it wasn't the solving the puzzle, it was the desire to have what was on the other side of the puzzle that summoned the Cenobites. And I
Right.
felt like that was an unfortunate thing that the new movie didn't get right, in my opinion, was that it was simply solving the puzzle that caused the chaos. And there's a great scene in I think Hellraiser 2 where Pinhead says that it is not hands that summon us, but desire.
Great
And I always
quote.
thought, and I thought that was to me, that was the most important quote of the entire genre, the Hellraisers franchise, was that it wasn't just the mechanism of solving the puzzle; it was a kind of deeper desire. And I always loved that idea. There was sort of a malevolent desire that summoned them. And I, as a reader of people like George Bataille, who I'm a big, I've written on and done episodes about, that's always been a fascinating element to me of transgressive desire. That's a fascinating trope, which is more interesting than Jason, right? Because in Jason in those movies, any desire is transgressive desire,
Yeah.
um, and that's to me less interesting because then it's just like you're just Christians. It's just fundamentally a Christian movie. It's a puritanical movie, um, which I'm less. Which is fine, but it's less intellectually interesting. It's, again, aside from the fact, of course, who doesn't want to see some person bundled up in a sleeping bag and beaten to death against a tree. Like, okay, like, okay, you have me at beaten to death, in a some in a sleeping bag beaten with a tree. Fine.
So we've kind of been dancing around this, but this is what I'd like to ask this question to everyone. What scared you as a kid?
It's pretty scared of vampires. I mentioned the young woman I was scared of in sixth grade. Um, Still convinced she could have been a vampire. I hope she never finds me. Um, um, Scared of ghosts. I thought ghosts were a very terrible idea. I still find ghosts to be a pretty frightening idea. Um, One of the most terrifying ideas that I think that I have in my own personal belief system is that I might survive death, that there might be an afterlife. Like there's no more terrifying concept to me than that. That I might not actually die. The only thing worse than dying is not dying. And there's something about the idea that I could wake up on the other side of this and there be anything, whether it be hell or heaven or reincarnation or anything, that oblivion doesn't lie at the other side of this is a positively terrifying idea to me. And anything that survives death, um, that has always terrified me, whether it be zombies. I remember like um, my one of my good friends growing up and I we loved to watch Night of the Living Dead and other Living Dead movies. And in my backyard, we had a kind of little, like, I don't know, shed that my dad had built that was mostly for storing tools. But we would go out and pretend that it like we were surrounded by zombies and we had to like defend the shed. And we had our guns and we had to board up the doors and it was really a thing. We really, you know, sort of kind of cosplayed Living Dead mythology. So what scared me, I think, was the possibility of survival after death. I was never scared of demons.
Hmm.
Like demons always struck me as sort of stupid. Like either you mucked it up and they came and got you because you did something stupid, or ultimately they're going to lose because like they're going to like fight against God or something. Like you can't win that. Like they're not they're playing the short game.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
pretty
they're the guys
obvious
playing.
ending.
They're good. Yeah, they're the guys playing penny slots. Like they're not going to win. So I was never terribly afraid of demons. I was never terribly afraid of monsters. They seemed very unlikely to me. I was, never terribly afraid of aliens. But yeah, survival of the ability to survive after death, whether it be um, zombies or revenants, ghosts, um, and even now, ghosts to me are somewhat of a troubling aspect, a troubling idea. Because on the one hand, we think that if we hear a bump that goes in the night, it's easy to attribute that to a ghost until you have to start doing all the work of figuring out what in the hell that really means. Like, if you see a ghost, what are the photons bouncing off of? If they can open your cabinets, how in the hell are they interacting with your cabinets? If they're walking around on the floor, how are they interacting with gravity? Why isn't gravity sucking them down to the and things get really
Yeah,
complicated.
yeah.
If ghosts are real, then everything we know about physics has to be altered, blah blah blah. And so ghosts are, I think, a paradigmatic example of a simple solution that breaks everything basically. And so these kinds of things are quite worrying to me. So yeah, um, yeah, even the idea of zombies. I remember as a kid, the idea of being bitten by a zombie and then being, non-consensually brought back from the dead to harm the living. There's always a positively terrifying idea. At least the vampires were sort of brought back with some degree of um, consciousness, right? Do you have the Lestat or whatever? He's brought back, but he can struggle morally with his terrible condition. He can eat rats or whatever.
Right.
And the zombie has no ability to do that there. And I think of this great Netflix show Black Summer that really shows it to me in the best way possible. To me, it's the best zombie genre show I've seen in I don't know, 10 years or something. Where in Black Summer you really come back as a kind of ravenous animal. Um, and that to me the most frightening example of the zombie genre, especially the first season of Black Summer. I was like, my God, this is utterly terrifying. Um, so yeah, I think it was always um, coming back after you're dead. I'm a 1 star. Do not recommend.
I'm with you on zombies, man. Zombies and werewolves for the same aspect, I believe, because they're a little
Yeah,
bit too close to humanity.
right.
It can almost be real in your head as a kid. It's like, well, that's just a person that's back from the dead. Well, that's a person that just happened to be under some curse.
Yeah,
They
that's a
can
great
harm
one.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the ability not to control yourself. It's the Jekyll and Hyde thing. Yeah, that's a fantastic. Yeah, yeah. I maybe haven't had thought too much about werewolves in the same way, but yeah, the idea that you're ripped out of who you are in a way that you don't consent to. Yeah, I think werewolves are an excellent example of that. Yeah, next fall I'm going to do a whole series on werewolf literature. I've
Oh,
been looking
looking
at a lot of
forward.
yeah, I've been looking at a lot of like 16th century and 15th century werewolf literature, some of the really earliest stuff. And sort of looking at that literature. So yeah, I'm looking forward to doing that next year.
It's definitely my bag. I'm just going to say, what about D&D?
Oh, I love D&D. I grew up playing AD&D. So I was folks who play some AD&D, you would know, you remember things like armor classes 0 and Thakos, to hit armor classes 0. You'll remember you'll folks will, will remember either through PTSD or through nostalgia or through Stockholm syndrome, the good old days of having to look up tables for how to kick a door in and everything else. Um, and it's not just a strength check. God forbid. No, no, it's real nerddom. You got to look up 3 tables to figure out whether you kick a door in. It's going to take you 15 minutes to do the research. Um, it's the good old days of you got to drink all that Coke to be awake all night to figure
Were
out
you
you kick a
always the
door in.
DM?
So yeah, I was almost always DM. Yeah, so I play, and even now, in the last few years where I've been playing, I'm typically DMing. Um, I do wish I would, could play a character. But yeah, my go-to AD&D world was always Planescape. I love Planescape as sort of I love the political drama. I love the access to the different planes. I love the the cosmopolitanness of it. I love that. But I will say, as a grown man, one of my favorite things is being having enough money now where I can go back and buy the old books that I could never afford and read the Dark Sun books and the Ravenloft books and even the Spelljammer books, which are wonderfully like hair metal, absolutely hair metal 80s. Um, but no, I'm not a purist about D&D. I'm not sort of like, yeah, double down on Thakos. I love 5e. I think 5e is great. I love playing 5e. I never got into playing Pathfinder or anything else. Kind of a D&D purist. Not because I think it's not because I know it's any better, because I don't know any better. Uh, but yeah, I
Did you?
love role playing games. I love playing D&D. I think it's a great game for adults because as adults we're deprived of our imagination. That's one of the things that we're robbed of. The transition from childhood to adulthood is being robbed of your imagination. It's a great crime committed against children to rob them of their imagination. Adults are often robbed of community, especially non-religious people are robbed of community. Um, the famous joke about Jesus. Jesus' greatest miracle is being 30 and having 12 close friends. Um, so we're robbed of community, and we're robbed of storytelling. That there's either you're telling facts and there's debate about facts, or you're telling like made up stuff.
Right.
And the fact that we don't sit around a fire and we don't tell stories, we don't spin yarn, we don't talk about the big fish we caught, and everyone knows you didn't catch that damn fish. But we all entertain your story and we talk about, and
Right.
that we don't have a storytelling culture, we don't have a community, and we don't have the role of imagination. Those three components, right? In addition to that, a game based on cooperation, not competition, where you succeed because you cooperate, because you think critically and don't believe stuff. A game in which you like, it's not about just like sniping people at a distance. It's about like getting into the muck of it and figuring it out with your friends. Those are all values that, my God, if we could just learn a sliver of those values in our society, we'd be living in such a better society.
I will say it is kind of cool to see D&D make the full circle into being very nerdy to now it's almost mainstream.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic.
Hmm.
And I am not one of these guys who's, oh, it used to be cool, hipsters, the hipster mentality. I'm like, no, my God, if I could get 20 million people learning the values of this game,
Right.
I'm about it, because I think it will make for a better world. Um, and again, and even more forceful than that, the idea that in the 80s, we had to kind of hide our D&D stuff because, we were all devil worshippers and all this, that, and the other. And the truth of the matter is D&D is actually a predictor for pro-social, beneficent behavior. Same with metalheads. Metalheads are far more likely to give to charity. They're far more likely to be like pro-social. They're far more likely actually to be like open and tolerant of other worldviews. And you would look at a metalhead and you might think, oh wow, they're kind of gruff and scary looking or whatever. But again, like these stereotypes are so harmful, and they've been perpetuated by people who don't have our interest in mind, and by our I mean just common people.
Right.
And I think of metalhead culture, metal culture, D&D culture, nerd culture. These are all were all demonized at some level in the 1980s, and have all shown to be incredibly important sources of very beneficial traits and virtues that I think society in general could benefit from.
You just mentioned, having to hide D&D and such with your interests early on. I grew up in the South as well, have always been interested in the macabre. Certainly I had books I had to hide from my grandmother. Did you have to sort of hide things from your parents growing up from when you started collecting these books?
I think my parents were pretty forgiving. I think the funny, it was never like the weird books I brought home. It was always the logic books. And one time I got into an argument with my dad and started quoting Aristotle's logic, and kind of winning the argument, frankly. And that was into that. This damn, it's just it's one thing to it's one thing to have a book about how to transmute lead into gold, or a book about demonology or something. Or something to best your dad in an argument because you quote Aristotle. That was it. That was it. Aristotle had to go. Um, and my dad has since expressed real regret about that, and so I want to make sure to honor him, and him saying that was a mistake he made parenting. But yeah, I think that my parents are pretty forgiving. Mom's kind of a hippie, and she was kind of into whatever. And but yeah, I was able to read whatever I wanted to read. And I read a lot of stuff I certainly didn't understand. Aristotle being a good example. I hardly understand the hell he's talking. I still don't understand what Aristotle's talking about half the time. Um, but yeah, I don't think I had to hide a lot. I think I had to be judicious around what you flashed at school, or you didn't want to really bring your D&D books to school. That just wasn't like a good look.
Right.
You know, you know, uh, yeah. So it wasn't. I don't think I had to hide much, but it was about like you got to keep it to yourself a little bit.
Gotcha. Now, would you consider yourself a metalhead growing up as well?
No, no, I would not. No, I don't know what music I listened to when I was a kid. I got into like industrial music in the 90s. I was really into like Skinny Puppy and Throbbing Gristle and like Nine Inch Nails and stuff in the 90s. I really liked industrial, but it wasn't until graduate school, like well into my 30s, that I got into metal. And even now it's still like a very specific genre of metal. I listen to a lot of like standard sort of hipstery black metal, a little folk metal.
Hey, I'm all
Um,
in it,
yeah, so I listen to
up and
like
down.
yeah, so I although I will say that in the gym recently I have really like rediscovered Metallica, which again, like I didn't listen to Metallica as a kid, so I didn't really know. And the more thrashy early Metallica I've gotten into a little bit. Like I've gotten into it. It's like, oh yeah, this is really like musical genius. Um,
You talking like kill 'em all, ride the lightning type
yep,
stuff? Mm.
yep, yeah. So that kind of stuff. And again, it's really cool for me because I didn't listen to that when I was a youngster. And so now that I'm listening to it for the first time, you can see like it's genius. I could like
You can
I remember the
appreciate
first
it.
time you can really appreciate it. You're like, oh wow, like this is like I remember like I listened to the Black Sabbath, the actual the album Black Sabbath. I remember I listened to it for the first time all the way through well after I was into metal. I was listening to a lot of black metal and stuff. And then you can listen to that album and hear basically every genre of metal,
Yep.
like in like like
In the '70s.
in the 70s. And you
Yeah.
can hear like, oh yeah, there's some black metal there, and there's some like folk metal there, and there's some death metal there. And you can like hear like in embryo the entire genre emerging. And you're like, these are a bunch of cool working class kids from Birmingham. Man, they're
Right.
just like working class genius musicians. And God bless them. Like they pioneered this amazing genre, of which so much is commentary. So I will say that I'm a late bloomer to really discovering metal. And on the one hand, that's kind of embarrassing or whatever, but on the other hand, I really come to it with a beginner mind because I haven't heard it before. but also I get to come to it knowing like, oh, this album's really important. Let me appreciate what's really important about it, and I kind of can hear it for the first time, and for me that's really amazing. I mean, the records that you love, imagine being able to hear them again for the first time, and I get to have that experience. I feel very blessed. Feel very blessed to be able to do that.
You know, as you're progressing, you're growing up, Justin, was it always your goal as you're getting closer to college to pursue religious studies? Was that a waypoint you always had your sights on?
I mean, I had no idea I was even going to go to college. I no idea. My dad was a pipe fitter, and I work with my dad as a pipe fitter in the South. You know, a lot of kids do their dad's job. That's
Yeah.
the way it goes. So yeah, my dad always said, you know, like, you know, son, use your mind, not your body, because your body's gonna give out, but your mind can keep going. And you know, again, like real working class wisdom. He's like, I want you to get out of this. Like, you don't need to be in these attics. And it was terrible working summers in attics, Mississippi, laying down black pipe for sprinklers is what my dad did, and he had to carry that pipe by hand because those buildings didn't have elevators in them yet. So my dad really broke his body, you know, to raise us, and I worked with him, and I saw, you know, in my own self how hard it was. But it was funny. I never thought I would go to college. I was, you know, it was a random, totally random that I ended up in college. It just so happened that I was reading in a cafe, getting coffee before I had to go to work. That a college professor saw me, and I'd been checking out books from the library since I was a kid, and eventually I'd checked out some damn book from Hegel, you know, lectures on the philosophy of history or something, I think it was. And the professor was like, "Yeah, I seen you in here reading this, like on the, you know, like daily." He's like, why are you reading that? You know, I'm wearing Dickies or whatever. You know, it doesn't look right. And I was like, yeah, it's the guy that wrote the book on history, I guess. He's like, you know, you can come to college and we can study this stuff with other people. You can get paid to do it. You can get you a scholarship. And I was like, well, I don't know if I believe that, but I'll come see what you're talking about. Eventually, he took me over to the college, local college, and invited me in. And I was like, well, y'all give me money, I'll keep coming. And they kept giving me money, so I kept coming. And eventually ended up, you know, on the other side of the podium. So in some ways, it's sort of a funny story that I never intended to be you know, an academic. I'm a working class kid. I come from a working class family, and it just so happened that, you know, a very important moment in your life can lead to a big change, and very much thank that happened. And also, it means for me in a big way to give back, and that's why I love running my YouTube channel, where I can make everything accessible, everything free. You know, I don't ask for anything. Is like, you know, as long as people can support, some people can support me, that's fine. But otherwise, I'm never going to make anything behind a paywall or make exclusive content or anything like that. I'm like, no, I was poor. I remember being poor. I remember wanting to learn about this stuff, um, and eventually I ended up at the only degree granting institution in the world that offers an advanced degree in this material. And
You do the
and
Lord's work. I mean, he probably doesn't think so, but you know.
he might. You'd be surprised. Depends on the Lord.
Yeah, right. Good one. I've already had several people today just message me and say how much they love your channel and they're looking forward to the episode. And one of the best channels on YouTube. It's just great, man. I was looking for what you do. I was looking for something like that when I was in college myself. It's
Yeah.
great.
No, it's the advice I always got told. One of the pieces of advice I was told early on is make the content for the you that was looking for it. And
Yeah,
that's what I try to do. You know, make it engaging, make it funny, make it as deep as you can, you know, make it serious and rigorous. And also give people the courage and the ability to empower themselves to learn it on their own. Because you'll never find a better teacher than you.
right. And you've in your videos and on your website, you've gone into detail about how it's sort of limited. Places are limited to study esotericism, you know, in a academic capacity. Do you see that? Do you see that going forward or backward?
I think it's going forward. There now, you can get an MA in magic at the University of South Carolina. There's a there's a new program in Exeter, so it is getting better. It's getting better. You know, we need more PhD programs that are that are offering the terminal degrees so that people can really get out there and teach this material. We also need academic institutions to get their head out of their ass and realize that people are really interested in this material, and to hire people, frankly, like me and other people, to like teach this, because people want to learn about it. And so I think there's a combination of things that need to happen, but I do think that you know, um, I do think the Titanic is turning. Um,
That's
so
good.
I'm hopeful, but also, I'm gonna keep on keeping on doing what I'm doing, and providing the educational services that I can provide, because those will always be free, and it's not gonna require you to go into tens of thousands of debt for college. And so I'm going to continue building what I'm building, and doing what I'm doing, and fostering the community of education that I can foster. Also, I'm really enthusiastic when institutions are doing the same, and I'd love to work with them to make that all happen. I feel like we can all knit together a quilt where people have maximal access to educational opportunities, and I feel like we're all better for that when we can achieve that.
Well said. So, just referencing the book you showed us a few minutes ago, what is the coolest thing that come across your desk?
Cool thing to come across my desk. I guess maybe, in fact, maybe it's actually right behind my monitor. Let me grab it real fast. Um, it's also a book. There are a couple of things that are interesting, but this is the most neat, interesting thing recently. So this is a tiny little 1549 edition of a collection of mostly Greek pagan occult wisdom. So this is Iamblichus is on the Egyptian mysteries, Porphyry's on spirits and demons, the teachings of Hermes Trismegistus, Michael Celsus's on demons. So it's sort of a grab bag of, like, if you were living in the 16th century and you wanted to become a magus, this would be kind of the book that you would want. And this is a neat book just on its own, and so, like, well worth having if you want it. And this is the first edition from 1549. Um, but what's really neat about this one is not just what it's about, but also who owned it and also who signed it. So I don't know if you can make out that
I can't see it too well.
signature there, but that says Harry Houdini.
Holy shit, that is pretty damn cool.
So it was, yeah, it says H Houdini. So this was owned by this was in the Houdini collection. It's signed by Houdini there on the frontispiece. Again, it's maybe mirrored because of the recording, but this is actually was owned by Houdini and signed by him. And this page here says from the Harry Houdini collection, and it was noted in 1923. So so this is a neat volume.
Yeah,
This is a really neat. It's a book about magic,
from a
signed by
magician.
signed by one of the greatest.
The magician.
Yeah, one of the greatest magicians. And it's funny for me to have it in Detroit here, where of course Houdini died. And so it's a neat book to have in the collection. I don't know what I'm going to do with it ultimately, but it is neat to, like.
Was that sent to you?
So no, I got it at auction.
Okay, gotcha.
I won it at auction. So it's that's a rare volume. The 1549 really comes to market, and signed by Houdini. It makes it one of a kind. So I think it's a pretty
Oh,
neat little text to have.
oh yeah. Um, so you've already said, Justin, you don't like to debunk, but I do want to ask you, when it comes to occult themes in films, are there ones that come to mind that express those themes very well?
Yeah, I think there are. I think there are some films that do occult stuff well. The Devil Rides Out. It's a great film that deals with some occult stuff. Pretty
Dennis Wheatley.
technically, yeah. Dennis
Yeah.
Wheatley, yeah. So that film, I think, displays Wheatley. Wheatley knew Aleister Crowley. He was really acquainted with the occult world at that time. He himself was not an occultist. He was an anti-occultist, but he was the kind of guy who took his opponents very seriously, and he depicted them very accurately. So I would say The Devil Rides Out captures some degree of kind of occulty stuff of that time period. Um, The Witch, I think, captures the kind of manic fever of 17th century Puritanism. So if you, it's not an accurate depiction of witchcraft, but it is an accurate depiction of what Puritans thought witchcraft was. So in that way, it captures their imagination very well. Um, there are very few films that depict alchemy very well. I think Pi does depict Kabbalah in a weird way, kind of well. Pi by Darren Aronofsky. It's a great experimental film of, I guess, the early 90s. The Devils also depict sort of like, I think, very well the kind of craziness that was going on with the Loudun possessions
Mm.
in the 17th centuries. That's also a really great
I haven't
film.
seen the movie. I'm familiar with the possessions themselves, but I have not seen that movie.
It's a fantastic film. It's one of the like really important like X-rated movies that really got banned everywhere. It is really crazy, but it's absolutely one of the best films, horror film wise. And the performances by everybody, including the nuns, by what's the name who plays Grandier. It's fantastic. It's a fantastic film. Really shocking, frankly. Um, a Dark Song, I think also A Dark Song is also a film I think captures the occult vibe very well. It doesn't accurately depict the ritual very well, the Abramelin, but it captures something of the vibe in
Mm.
a way that, like, again, part of art is not to teach us. Yeah, I think if we're looking for art to teach us, maybe we're not looking for the right thing, but sometimes art can communicate to us a deeper kind of truth, a deeper kind of like sense of what's going on. And I think that's okay. I don't go to film looking for documentaries. If I want to
Right.
watch a documentary, I'll watch a documentary. If I want to watch an episode of Esoteric, I'll make it. I don't expect film to do that work. I feel like people who expect film to do that work are really looking for film to do the wrong thing, or art to do the wrong thing. Art is about like communicating emotion and feeling and making an impression upon us. So I think those films do it quite well. Um, any other films that jump to mind? I'll say a film that recently I've watched several times now, that I think captures evil in a way that I've never seen captured, in a way that strikes me as a very deeply pre-modern, pre-Christian way of conceiving evil. Is I think it's called The Dark and the Wicked, or the Wicked and the Evil, or something like that. But it takes place on a Texas a Texas farm, and I've never seen a depiction of evil as like rigorously evil as that, where nothing can save you. There is nothing coming. It's done. And
What was the name of it?
like the dark and the wicked, I think. Let me see. Are the wicked and the evil? It has
Oh,
such a generic name that it's like hard to remember.
but it's a fairly recent movie.
Yeah, it's a fairly recent movie.
I'm gonna watch that.
Yeah, The Dark and the Wicked.
There we go.
Um,
Okay.
I've never
Dark
seen a
and
like I said, it's 2020. I've never seen a movie that captures evil, um, like in the way that pre-modern people thought of evil, is like predatory.
yeah.
That it was just playing with you. It couldn't be defeated. There was no stopping it. That it was just like mucking about with you, and it was just going to destroy you, and it was going to destroy you on its own terms, in its own time, and there's nothing you could do. And I like it also to go back to our talk about folk horror, is because they're just Texas farm people. There's no reason why they should be targeted. There's no reason why it should happen to them. And it just doesn't stop. And I find that sense of evil, like we're so used to the Exorcist sense of evil, where yeah, there's evil, and it can make a little girl do terrible things, and it can really like do terrible things. But ultimately, if we get the right priest in there, we can stop it.
Right.
And this does not give you that.
Is it a period piece?
No, it takes place in, I guess, 2020.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, it's a very like dude in his truck kind of movie. And it again, as both being Southerners, um, to me, it's just it captures it depicts Southern people very well, which is not a thing that happens often in film. Um, we're all either like redneck racists or Matthew McConaughey. Um, um, and I think that's well. I think another film also that, or show rather, that I think depicts the occult in a philosophical sense and dealing with evil and stuff like that is the first season of True Detective.
Yeah.
The first season of True Detective is one of the most philosophically rich pieces of storytelling I've seen in many years. I teach it.
Really?
Yeah, I teach it. When I teach pessimism, I use it as a textbook example of understanding philosophical pessimism. I think it's so well done.
Have you read any Thomas Ligotti?
Of course.
Oh,
Yeah.
so there's a lot of Ligotti in that True Detective
Yeah, yeah.
season.
So much so that it probably was plagiarized. Yeah, the conspiracy against the human race is very likely not just there, but probably plagiarized. Um, yep. So yeah, Ligotti. I also teach Ligotti in that sense, but yeah, I teach. I've taught a class on pessimism, and
You got to
you
have
know,
Ligotti in there then.
of course, yeah, we have the conspiracy against the human race. Sioran, like the Schopenhauer, yeah, classic. You can imagine it was a real cheery class. So,
So, obviously, Justin, with Esoterica, you're dealing with these extremely dense and complex topics or texts. Uh, you've been studying these things, years beyond just the prep for a certain video. But how much time on average would you say goes into a deep dive on just any particular video in general?
yeah, it depends on how well I know the base material. So, Gnosticism stuff, I feel like I know that stuff pretty well. I can usually pump an episode like that out over the course of a week. Um, it all depends. It's a huge range. Some stuff takes me, months to prepare. Some stuff takes me just a few hours. It all depends on how well I know the material. Um, but yeah, my work schedule is pretty standard. I lit review on Sundays. I write on Mondays. I shoot on Tuesdays. I edit on Wednesdays, and it's to the birds on Wednesdays. Now, again, the arc of that could be there's a lot of studying that goes on in the background.
Hmm.
But I'm in. The good thing about never getting a job in this stuff is that I never. I've been reading about it for decades, and I have a pretty big backlog of the things in my head that I can pump out an episode. So most of it goes pretty fast, but I have to be careful. There are definitely cases where I thought I knew kind of the general overview of the literature of a certain topic, and then crack the books, and I'm like, oh wow, there's a whole new 300-page book about this that's actually revolutionized the field, and I have not read it, and so that can be pretty stressful. But also the good thing about being on YouTube is it doesn't, it means that I can kick the can down the road. I can be like, okay, not this week. I'll read the book and do it 2 weeks from now or whatever. So,
Okay.
so yeah, it ranges everywhere from it. Sometimes it takes me 5 hours to get an episode out. Sometimes it probably takes me 100 hours to get an episode out. It all depends. But yeah, um, but yeah, it's also because I work inside my own wheelhouse. I'm not killing myself. I'm not trying to dump a ton of time into a topic. I'm usually not, or rather, I should say, I'm not ever building a topic out of scratch.
Right. Right. So I saw your answer to this on your frequently asked questions on your bio, but I'll let you expand if you want to. Have you ever had an experience that you would consider supernatural or paranormal?
No, no, I've never had nothing definitive. When I was a kid, I thought I saw weird stuff, and you know, um, and certainly I've had my experiences on psychedelic drugs and things like that. But I've never had an experience where I walk away to this day thinking, yeah, I can't explain that with anything else than saying it's paranormal or um, or supernatural. And that's not to say that it's not to say that I don't want to. I would like to because I think that's a big part of the human experience. I realize that I'm weird in that way that most people have, and most people have seen things that they take to be ghosts or what like a whole range of supernatural things, and I just haven't. I'd like to. I mean, if you own a haunted house or whatever, and you want to come sleep in your house, I'll binge a Netflix series in your house and wait around for the ghost to show up or whatever. But yeah, I've never had a situation where I've experienced something I think was supernatural, whether it was a miracle or a ghost or what have you.
Academically speaking, you say these topics, like we've been talking about, are sort of like pushed to the side and not taken as seriously. Or is does the flip side occur to you as well? To since you're not a practitioner, do you get backlash from the other side to where how can you expand upon these things when you don't believe them or you haven't at least tried it?
Yeah, yeah, I do get that sometimes where people are like, "You're just an armchair occultist." I'm like, "I'm not an occultist at all." I'm like, I got news for you, man. You're knocking it out in the open door. I'm not even an occultist. I would have to be an occultist to be an armchair one. Yeah, some people are like, "How can you judge whether it's true or not?" Because you never tried it. And I'm like, I've never judged whether it's true or not. You don't see that on my FAQ. You never see that in episode of Esoterica. I never get in the business of telling people what they experience because I don't have the ability to do that. I don't want to do that. So I don't do that kind of stuff. I just don't. I'm not a debunker. I don't
Right.
tell people. I don't tell people they haven't experienced things because that frankly is crazy. Um. So yeah, I have gotten people say things like, "Oh, how do you know it's wrong when you've never tried it?" And I'm like, I don't know it's wrong. I'm saying I haven't had those experiences, and I can't because I haven't had them. I can't deduce the same things that you can. You may be justified in your beliefs. You may be justified to believe the things you believe about spirits or demons or what have you. I'm not. And so, um, um, and then sometimes I get people saying things like, how dare you reveal all of our secrets to all the people? And I'm like, I don't know about you, man, but I got this book at the library, bro. Like, it
Yeah.
ain't too secret. um, if you think this is secret, I got bad news for you. um, so yeah, some people, I get some stuff like that, but the overwhelming response I've gotten from practitioners is they're just really happy to have someone who doesn't have a dog in the fight, who's just willing to take the material literally, like seriously,
Hmm.
and just present it seriously and empower practitioners and non-practitioners to sort out what they want to do with it.
Hmm.
And that's my bag. I have zero interest in convincing anyone that any of this is real because I don't know that it is. I doubt that it is, frankly. But also, I'm also not interested in disabusing people of their beliefs, of their experiences, because frankly, I can't do that. And
Right.
people that pretend that they can are, I don't know, it's evangelical stuff. That's just not my, that's not what I want to do. I'm here to present evidence. I'm here to empower people to search out for a better evidence. And I'm here not to bolster experiences, nor to tell people that their experiences are wrong or fake or yeah, I don't have any interest in doing that. I'm hearing saying this is evidence. Like let's see where it goes. And maybe it goes in a direction you like, and maybe it goes in a direction you don't like. But and again, I'm very lucky to have practitioner friends and colleagues who uh, who are happy to support my work and happy to chat with me and work with me on projects. And I'm happy to call them in when academics have failed to do their due diligence to study stuff. And it's the
Right.
occultists who've done the due diligence to study stuff. And I'm like, and it's not because I don't want to work with occultists, but I'm like, you academics have failed. You've looked down your nose at these people and they have done better work than you. So you think you're the repositories in your ivory tower of all this information. And God, it's not true. So yeah, I'm not picky. Good scholarship, it's good scholarship. I don't care if it comes from a practitioner or it comes from an academic. I just want to present the best evidence and the best data and the best like representation of this material I can to empower people to learn it for themselves.
Well said, and it's damn near impossible to quote unquote debunk a term or an idea like magic when it's almost personalized to each individual.
Yeah, I just don't. Yeah. No, I think if someone's, if I would be happy to be involved in a project where people are being exploited or harmed using these material. Um, I'm happy to be involved in stopping that. I don't want anyone to be harmed or animals to be harmed or people to be manipulated emotionally or psychologically or spiritually. But I think you see that far more in mainstream religion than you do in the occult. And again, that's a thing that I would want to hammer home. You're far more likely to be manipulated and abused in big institutions that have a lot of money and power to cover over their evils than you are a coven of, queer women in the forest. Let's be real about the situation, like who's really doing the harm here? Who's really doing like the institutional damage? Let's be really honest. It ain't a bunch of Wiccans.
I
It's
would love
big.
to run into a bunch of Wiccans in the forest.
Yeah, hey, at least you get a dance party in,
Right.
get some steps.
Out of all the academic and research projects you've worked on regarding the esoteric, which would you consider the most challenging? Is there one that you lost more sleep over than the others?
Yeah, it was a paper I wrote, long form paper I wrote in Amsterdam that really tried to hammer down what I think happened in the John D. Edward Kelly uh, sessions. Because if you look at those sessions on the paper, like literally on the archival data, they're really weird. And they're weird for a lot of reasons, not just the wife swapping, but there's a lot of strange shenanigans that go down in that text and those texts and those experiences. And I really wanted to give an account, um, from my point of view, that explained them, um, given all the intricacies involved in what happened. And I felt like there were two theories. There was one theory that said, Kelly was a charlatan and he tricked D. And that seemed wrong to me. It seemed wrong to me. And the other story was angels talked to D and Kelly. And that also seemed wrong to me. And when I studied it all, I was able to build out a theory that I thought explained what happened without having to explain Kelly as just a fraud, but also couldn't accept this was all from angels. And so that was a tough project because it was parsing out a lot of factors, uh, everything from mental health stuff on Kelly's part to 16th century epistemology and all kinds of stuff. So it was a tough paper. It was a tough paper. It kept me up. It took me months to write.
That sounds
But
like I'd like to read that.
yeah, I can send it to you. I'm still quite proud of it, and I would still stand behind most of it. Um, but it was a tough paper because again, like part of my career is threading that needle of we cannot reject, we cannot outright reject things, and also we can't simply believe the most simple explanation, which is angels and demons or whatever. We have to wrestle with the possibility this is actually very complicated.
Right.
And for me, I'm really comfortable sitting with with answers that are quite complicated, and that leaves open the possibility they were talking to angels. Maybe I'm fine with that.
Me
I'm fine
too.
with that. Like I'm not a I don't think that's true, but I don't have the legs to stand on to say that's impossible or something.
Right. Well, Justin, just to put a bow on everything here, can you tell us what's on the horizon for you? Tell folks just a little bit about what you got coming up for Esoterica and where they can find you.
Yeah, so you can find me just on Esoterica at YouTube, or my website, just justinsledge.com. I don't have any other social media because it scares the hell out of me. Um, uh, Sometimes I look up and I look over at Twitter and I look over there at like Instagram and I'm like, nope, back to the foxhole. Um, I'll let that burn over there and um, looks like a gas attack over there. I'm not going over there. No, what's going on? I'm taking a break right now. As you can imagine, no, September, October is like the mad dash to get a lot of content out, to really build the channel up. So right now I'm kind of in a break, like I'm recuperating a little bit to get a little gas back in me. Um, I'm going to be releasing my fall, my last rare book collection. I deal in antiquarian occult books, so it's really a chance to own, sort of a 17th century, 16th century book of magic or something. It's they're not cheap. I'm not going to pretend they're cheap, but they are, they are out there. And if it's a fun thing to be able to collect them and make them available to people. So I'm going to be releasing that catalog, I think maybe the end of this week, maybe the beginning of next week. And then as Esoterica content, I got some new John D stuff coming out. I'm going to be looking particularly at his Heptarchia Mystica. I'm going to finish, or not finish, I'm going to continue my series on the Inquisition, really looking very closely at the Inquisition. The Inquisition has a lot of misconceptions about it. People often think it was just like a book burning and people burning institution. That's not quite true. Looking at some other medieval manuals of magic that I have like in the hopper. Let me see what else I have coming up. I'm going to be covering an episode about Isabella Cortesi, one of the only, one of the top, really one of the five female alchemists that we know of from the Middle Ages. So she's an interesting character just because we don't learn about women alchemists. If you imagine
Right.
an alchemist, it's almost always some dude sitting in front of a crucible. But there were women alchemists. They're not well represented in the literature. Surprise, surprise. Um, but I'll be doing an episode on Isabella Cortesi, and it's we as part of a series on really working through talking about women alchemists. I think I'm doing an episode on Gianna Bruno's book on magic. So, you know, sometimes people ask me, are you gonna exhaust the esoterica? Like,
No.
no idea.
No.
Not a snowflake's chance in hell. Uh, there's so much to do.
It's endless.
Yeah, it's so much to do, and it's such a joy for me to be able to do it. And I'm really thankful and blessed that I have an audience that is interested and engaging and wants to learn from this material. And again, not learn from me, learn from this material. And I'm glad to be able to facilitate that learning. So to me, that's really an honor and a blessing to be able to help folks to do that.
We appreciate you, man. Seriously. Interview aside and all that, I'm a big fan of the channel.
I appreciate that.
Been watching for a long time, and it's been a pleasure chatting with you, Justin. Once I get this edited and stuff, I'll shoot you a link, and
Sure.
you have a great rest of your night.
You too, man. I appreciate you. Thank you for making time for me. And yeah, always reach out if you want to chat again.
Will do, and send me that paper.
I will. Yep. I'll shoot that over to you.
All right, have a good one, man.
All right. Take it easy.